Hello, everyone. Welcome to Conversations with Khofane. I'm Khofane Medise, and today is a really special day. I say this all the time, but this time I really, really mean it. Not more than the other times, but I mean it. Okay? Hi, Senzo.
Hello, Khofane.
I'm so happy that we're doing this again.
Absolutely.
The first time we did it was via Instagram Live, and we had a lot of interaction.
Yeah. And lots of questions and unresolved things. So, yeah.
A lot of unresolved things and a lot of questions. I don't remember most of them, I'll be honest. But we're finally here face to face in the interview format. And I'm really excited about this because the concept of branding, I think, has, like the word sustainability or advocacy, certain terms that are somewhat sensitive and require people to action for impact have become buzzwords, and it kind of just kind of flows in the streams. But before we get into that and what we'll be talking about, which is branding, but I think looking at the discipline of branding, not just in terms of this is how you do things, but the integrity behind it as well, which I know is something you're passionate about.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So tell us, who are you?
Who am I? I was answering this, I think I was at a workshop the other day, and they had one of those icebreakers, and it's like, who are you? What do you do? And I think every time I answer it, I realize that sometimes who you are, what your name is, and what you do is different. So when I say I am Senzo Xulu, that is my name. Is it who I am? I think obviously identity, by virtue of that, people want to say that. But I think it is different. I think who I am is the person that I show up as, the space that I occupy, how I relate in the world and with people. That's who I am. But my name is Senzo Xulu, as I've said, and I'd say who I am is, I always talk about, and it doesn't get old to me, but yeah, I'm a person that is all about introducing people to themselves.
Yeah.
That's what I'm here to do, and I love doing what I do with a sense of purpose. So whether that's education, whether that's industry, whether that's consulting or creativity, at the core of what I do is I love making sure that what I do has an impact on people.
Yeah.
And I've been blessed to be able to do that in aforementioned industries and education, where I've worked, and now still do guest lectures, but then also in industry, in advertising and branding and design and such.
Yeah. So because you're so helpful, I'll just have to say what your actual role is, being an executive creative director.
Differently, actually, now.
Oh.
Yes, yeah. So now, you're probably going to edit this out.
We're keeping it. It's my show. I can do whatever I want.
So at the new agency that I work at, which is called The Odd Number, amazing agency. So there, my role is digital.
Are they hiring? Kidding. Proceed.
Look, I can talk to people, but my role there is digital creative director. And amazing opportunity coming in at that agency and that company with like the reputation that they have and the creative excellence that's in that building, and being trusted really to sort of shape and galvanize the digital products within the agency. So that's, probably the last 2 months or so. That's my new role. Yeah.
What then is the difference? I mean, I guess the difference is the term creative and digital.
Sure.
But what's the differentiating factor between the two roles?
Look, I think depending on the agency that you go to, a lot of the time it is very much dependent on the scale of the creative department. So I think if you've got a department where there is a lot of, I guess, sort of horizontal and vertical scale, in the sense that there are many teams to look over, that's when the executive creative director role comes in. In a scenario where, with my new position now, there was an existing executive creative director. But in terms of looking at the digital side of things from a creative point of view, then that becomes sort of my portfolio. I still fall under the ECD. Terry McKenna is an incredible creative. So it is a scale thing. In some instances, it's a seniority thing. So you would have creative directors that report up to the executive creative director. But yeah, that's, I guess, the differences in that. Whereas I think previously, yeah, so there were creative directors and teams and creatives that worked under me. I mean, here it's just a different, yeah.
This is all very new to me. And I'll be
Really?
honest because, the term, it's not acronym, what is it? Whatever that is.
Yes.
CMO.
Yes.
So when I heard CMO, Chief Marketing Officer, I thought that's a lot. That is pretty hectic. And then when you told me you were, well, in your previous position, creative executive director, I was like, what's that? Are we making stuff up now? And now you're digital. But also I'm appreciating the need for those roles, as opposed to kind of placing all this responsibility of being creative.
Absolutely.
And I think anyone who's listening to this interview and watching it will appreciate how you are a master of the craft of language.
That's so good.
Thank you. Funny but true.
Yeah.
So I'm appreciating that, but it's like, how do these roles aid in the marketing umbrella?
Yeah. I think there absolutely is a side of it that can get very convoluted and very confusing in terms of what do you actually do. And there is that. And because people at the end of the day will refer to themselves as whatever, there's chief happiness officers or
okay.
And so there is an aspect where I think the title, the role, and the mandate aren't all sort of consistent. And so it's good that you have something that identifies what you do. But I've always said your job and your role are not the same thing. So
what does that mean?
Your job and your role. So your job is generally related by your title. So you are a chief marketing officer, you are a creative director. But for me, your role is the value that you bring. And often, I think when you do it the right way, your role in terms of how you fill it and how you fulfill it can go beyond just being, or within the constraints of the title.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of people do get stuck on the titles and they do, and you hear juniors, I want to be a creative director one day, or, I want to be this. And you forget that those should only be affirmations of the value that you bring, not the aspiration for what you want to bring.
Yeah.
So you should be wanting to get a title because you have a desire to bring a certain amount of value and growth and obviously talent and expertise. And then in doing that, you then get a title that justifies that.
Right.
And so I think, obviously, from an operational point of view, like I say, it's important to know that, okay, that person does that and that person does that. But for me, like I say, it's consistency between role, job, and mandate. Role being your title, job being the value that you bring, and then mandate being what are you actually called to do in that specific space.
Yeah. I'm having a hard time constructing or structuring how I'd like this conversation to go because I'm very excited. But also you're saying a lot of things that I'm thinking, man, I'm not really sure if we're going to be talking about what I wanted us to talk about at first. But I'd like to add the academic value of the work that you do. And I know you don't want me to ask it, but I'm going to do it anyway. It's my show. Oh no, what can we do?
That's okay.
It's okay. So on your LinkedIn, it's all public. It's public knowledge unless you decide to change it after this. You're studying your PhD in brand leadership. What is brand leadership?
So, I mean, if people at Vega hear me say this, I hope I'm going to represent this correctly.
Yeah.
But maybe to preface, I think it's important to say why. People study for different reasons, and I think it wouldn't be fair if we didn't respect their reasons.
Yeah.
Do I agree with all of them? No. But for me, it's always been, and even ask my mom, so I've always been curious about the world, and I think my curiosity has led me to explore and to want to understand how things work. And finding, I think, my feet in terms of what I want to do with my life and what I feel is my calling vocationally. For me, studying was just a cool way to formalize that.
Yeah.
So it's never been about the books or about knowledge or about titles.
Doctor.
So, and the amazing thing is that my sister is a doctor. Shout out to my sister.
Okay.
Doctor and Doors Xulu. And I love it a bit. And yeah, so it's always been about, for me, formalizing the curiosity that I have about the field and the industry that I work in. And that curiosity is never going to go away. So after my first degree, I worked a bit and was like, I'm still curious. I got into masters, did that. I'm still curious.
Yeah.
And so naturally, the PhD for me was just an extension of my curiosity. Because I do want to find out more about the world, but I do really enjoy being able to articulate why I do what I do and how to do it, and also then how to assist and aid other people to do the same. So for me, that's what the PhD is about, is creating a platform for myself that when I do talk about this craft and what we do, there is a little bit of like credibility to it, and it's not just my random thoughts. But it's definitely first and foremost a curiosity thing. And so for me, I sort of, you shop around. Initially, I wanted to do another master's after I finished my first master's. And I mean, I had the amazing opportunity to be accepted to study at the Rhode Island School of Design in Rhode Island, in the States. And that didn't sort of work out, and because I was going to do another master's there. And then I looked around, I want to do a PhD. I started it somewhere else. It wasn't working out. And then I think Vegas sort of introduced theirs. It may have been just before lockdown or just after lockdown. PhD in brand leadership. And I was like, that sounds amazing. Because what was important for me was that I never wanted to, I think, pigeonhole the sort of education side or the education journey that I go on. I don't want to be known as the design guy or the creativity guy or the advertising guy. I want to be known as a person that has influence and input and impact in those areas. And I think the PhD that I went into had to allow me to be able to do that. So a PhD in brand leadership, I think, is exactly that. The world is governed a lot by the brands that we see, on screen, on our phones and around us. But what makes those brands stand out and what makes the impact of those brands, long-standing and sustainable is the leadership aspect. So in terms of how do brands step into the role of leading certain aspects of society and culture, the way Red Bull leads in extreme sports, the way Nike to a certain extent leads in street culture, and Apple in technology. So the idea that brands can be at the forefront of leading society
and culture
is both incredibly exciting, but also incredibly scary if they don't do it well. And so from a sort of a body of knowledge point of view, it's important that I think we have outputs that create frameworks and knowledge that allows brands and practitioners to understand, I think, how to navigate that space. Because we are in a branding economy. Whether it's social media, like I say, digital media, everything that we see, I think, in the world is either supported, promoted, or in some way affiliated to a brand. Whether it's political or social or otherwise.
Yeah, that was a mouthful. I will be honest. I'm not really sure what to pinpoint. But you did mention when a brand doesn't do it well. I'm just curious what you mean, especially if that particular brand was obviously a leader in whatever society, or especially, you're mentioning global brands. Yeah. So at that scale, what does it mean when a brand doesn't do well, or do you lead the culture, community, global community well?
Yeah. So I think maybe to a phrase that you mentioned earlier about brand integrity. So, which, and I'm thinking theoretically isn't maybe something that, is touched on a lot. I think a lot of people talk about brand ethics, and that goes into regulations and how responsible are brands. And personally, that's tricky because ethics to who and according to what, and who's deciding what the moral code is, right? And I think that is a very slippery slope. It's a necessary slope because there are things that do need to be regulated, and there are things where we do sort of need a black and white that this is good and that's not. But the sort of gauge around what is good in South Africa may not be good in Uganda or Botswana.
Yeah.
That's where it becomes tricky. So on the ethical side, I think on the integrity side, for me, why that conversation can be a lot more universal and I think a lot more pervasive in industry and in conversations. So integrity in the first instance maybe gives off the whole moral thing. But I think the one that is more probably tied to brands in a more relevant way is integrity, speaking about the ability of something to remain consistent and whole.
Elaborate.
Right? So if I talk about, Hofauna's integrity, if I question that, that's because perhaps there's a sense of inconsistency in the way that you've behaved. So you said one thing, but then your actions demonstrate something else. So integrity in that sense, the ability for something, an entity, to remain consistent and whole. And so if you apply that to brand integrity, for me, that's when then it becomes really applicable that is there a way that we can look at brands and how they are able to remain consistent and whole? That what they promise or what they communicate or what they promote or what they argue for is consistent with their behavior. And I mean, just top line. So if a brand talks about sustainability and we want to be eco-friendly, whatever the case may be, that their practices and the way they operate is consistent with that. That's brand integrity. If a brand talks about we want to champion, the youth and empower the youth, and you look at the, employment structures and leadership and there's no youth representation, that's lack of a brand integrity for me. If you look at brands on one hand that sometimes want to speak up on social issues, but then another time don't. So for me, brand integrity is the ability of a brand to remain consistent in who it is, what it says it is, and why it exists. Because then that's when you have the case of, are they living up to what they promise? Do you feel a sense of consistency and then you can look at it just from a communication point of view. So what you say on your website matches if the product is said on the packaging. You can look at it from that point of view. But I think the better conversation to be had is from a sort of more conceptual, a more sort of, cultural, societal lens. Are you who you say you are?
Right.
Where you love doing CSI projects, but what about that? And it's a tricky conversation because the same way with people in the sense that we would sometimes have certain grace, right? In that if you make an error, should it be an indictment against your whole character? And then I nullify you, but I'll use the word that's used. I cancel you.
Culture.
Right? I cancel you because you did something that was against your character. Is that a fair way? I mean, I think that's a question, right? Because if that lens that we use to people, we apply it to brands, how willing are we to be forgiving when brands make mistakes?
Yeah. And so I'm thinking now, right? So when I think I was in the 7th grade and I read the description of entrepreneurship, and entrepreneurs is something about, but all in all, it just said someone who has an idea to solve a problem and make money out of it. So where in the scheme of things did we move from, I'm here to solve a problem, make money, to, well, you're here to make money, but this is how you're presenting yourself and this is how you're leading the culture. When does the business then become a brand? Is it something that's from the onset? Like where was it like mutually inclusive? I don't understand that part. Yeah.
Look, I think it's with the evolution of all things, right? In the sense that there have been, and there are businesses right now that purely exist as businesses, because branding 101 is that there is brand strategy and there's business strategy, and they are different. And of course, the foremost speakers and authors and the voices in brand theory, we always talk about the two coming together in the sense that the brand strategy complements the business strategy. And when you have that, and there's a very natural and organic synergy, that's when you generally have a good outcome. Not always, but that's what the theory says. So ideally, is the reason why the business exists from an entrepreneurship point of view is to solve a problem. The branding or the branding strategy is then what assists it to become relevant to its audience that it communicates to.
Yeah.
So you want to solve a problem, but you being able to solve a problem is not a problem for yourself, it's a problem for an audience. The bridge for you to be able to communicate to that audience in order for that problem to be solved is in branding, i.e. and marketing. So it's they need each other, and the one is sort of the intrinsic and, why do we exist and what's our core mandate and what, as a business, what is our niche and the gap in the market and all of that. And then the branding platform then allows you to have a voice and have a personality and have a way in which you show up into the market and into the world, and a way to create relevance with the audience that you've identified as your target market.
Yeah.
50 years ago, 40 years ago, 30 years ago, people didn't really care.
Yeah.
It was just a business, right?
Yeah.
I'm a business owner. And business owners, I think for a long time, never saw the need to see their businesses as brands. And the potential of their businesses to become brands and to behave like brands. It was, we operate, and that's why if you look at the structures within businesses, a lot of the roles that were there were operational. And there was little appetite, unless you were, big conglomerates or big transnational, to really sort of, put emphasis on the branding division, if you will. So I think now people see that because there are so many products and companies and businesses within the same markets, you do need to differentiate. And differentiating at a business level is important. But if you want to get that out to the world and have people believing in that, then that's where branding comes in.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just been a natural progression of people realizing that, hey, if we really want to be competitive, and the markets are competitive, whatever industry you're in, unless you are thinking of stuff from Mars, because I would imagine there are only a few brands, sort of thinking in that space, excuse the pun. But yeah, it's just naturally become a consideration for business owners to go, I want to start a business, and you'll see it now. I want to start a business. I want to sell hair pieces. And even though, there's a market for that and it's highly competitive, but the people starting those businesses are thinking, oh, I need a logo. I need a name.
Oh, yeah.
I need an Instagram page.
Get an influencer.
Do you know what I mean? What does my packaging look like? So, whereas before it was, I have an idea, let's go.
Yeah.
We'll think about the logo on the way. You'll get a cousin who knows how to, use Canva or Paint to design it. Whereas I think now it is a lot more sooner in terms of the entrepreneurship journey that people are thinking about the role of branding.
Yeah. And I'm appreciating now, not now really, but by virtue of knowing you, that branding goes beyond a logo and the color scheme and, okay, this is the look and feel. It trickles down to even the employees and the values of the company as well. So but also in the same light, I'm wondering what really is branding, because I've been asked to talk about personal branding because I've got a great brand. Personal brand, that is. Because I wasn't able to understand what a business brand was, but I understood myself and the values that lie within myself. And so that was an easy route to take.
Yeah.
But when it came to the business brand, I was really struggling. And so I was like, okay, well, let me use myself to sell the business. And that's what was logical to me. And so I'm asking you now, what is branding? Do we separate it and say, okay, well, there's a personal brand and there's a business brand and an organizational brand. But when we talk about branding, do we take it back to the time when we were branding cows and our animals?
You joke, but
it's true.
But it's true.
Yeah.
And I mean, yeah, if you look at probably all of the branding theory textbook, the marketing textbooks, when they talk about the origins of branding, that's where they're going to start, right? And cows being branded, and farmers being able to identify their livestock,
right?
And the term about what's the word I want to use? Creating an emblem that identifies that which belongs to you. That was because you would create a little emblem, get a silversmith to, shape it for you, put it in flame, and you'd brand your livestock.
Yeah.
And like I say, every sort of branding theory textbook will start there. I think the easiest way that I often describe it is giving personality to an inanimate object. So the objects aren't always inanimate, and I'll explain why now. But for me, its most fundamental sort of level, it is that giving personality to an inanimate object. And so when you talk about the difference organizational person, there are. So I mean, the sort of three basic is a person brand, or person branding, or people branding is sometimes called, is place branding. So places can be brands. There's product branding. So,
I'm not going to act like I understand what places can be brands means. I thought I did. And I really did try to think about it. I was like, are we talking about some structures in Rome and Italy? Like, no. What do we mean by that?
So think of the New York brand. I Heart New York.
Right.
Well, it's Apple or whichever way they do it, right? So in terms of experience, in terms of the memory and the recall that people have about New York, that is a very shaped, unless you've been there and you've experienced it, but from the outside, there are visual cues, cultural cues that are attached to New York as a place. The yellow cabs, the Big Apple, the hot dogs, downtown Manhattan, all of that that's part of place branding. And as a destination, if you look at it from that point of view, think of the Seychelles, think of South Africa, brand South Africa, right? Think of Egypt, think of Paris, think of the places around the world that through, I think, cultural sort of association, that we just think of certain things when we think of that place, but B, some, locations and places and countries and cities actually work really hard, in terms of positioning themselves as a destination. And that would be place branding.
All right.
The same way Cape Town brands itself very differently to the way Durban brands itself here in South Africa. I would imagine Gaborone, would be different to, from a cultural and experience point of view, to the other cities in both.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, going back to what you're saying.
Yeah. So people or personal branding, place branding, product branding, which is probably the easiest one. It's like Coke or your phone or a shoe, which is a product, and then service branding. So service branding, like an airline. So you can't buy an airline. It's not something you can take off of the shelf. That's a service brand. Or home affairs, or so sort of organizations that render a service that you just, you can't take it off the shelf, but you can have an experience with it, and you can, interact and engage with it. So I said three in the beginning, but it's four: person, place, product, and service.
Right.
And each of those absolutely has its, the nuances in terms of how you approach that, in terms of what I think is expected or normal within those categories. So think, for example, service branding is very much like reliant on trust. Because if you're rendering a service, I have an experience of that, but I'm not necessarily going to experience it every day. If you're wearing shoes, you can wear your shoes every day. But a service, I may go fly on a airline today, and then fly again 2 weeks later, whatever the case may be. And in that industry or within services, it is so important to build trust because you don't have the same customer every day. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So those are just, an example in terms of how within the particular branches of branding, there are certain things that I think you sort of outplay, and then certain things that may not be as critical to success in that particular area.
Yeah. And then when we dim it down a bit more, I know that questions that I've asked myself and I've heard my peers also ask is what does one really separate themselves, especially if you're a solopreneur, whatever they call it, or you have a small business, or you're trying to scale, or you're just kind of in the intermediary section of it all. How do you separate yourself from the business, or should you separate yourself from the business? For example, I'll use myself and just lay myself vulnerable in this conversation. Yeah. My business is heavily reliant on my personality, or on my character, or on my brand rather. I was very comfortable with that because I knew who I am and my consistency. So I was like, okay, 10 years from now, I'm pretty sure I'm still going to be the same type of person. Absolutely. And it was okay. I was okay with that. But I do understand the nuances of it, of wanting to, I want to be fun, I want to show a bit of shoulder every now and then.
Are you sure?
No.
I don't think you do. No.
Yeah, so that kind of that position that one may find themselves in, maybe their business hasn't been around for more than 5 years, and they're still kind of like, okay, I get it, me, and I'm great on LinkedIn, but I get it down on Instagram.
True. I think that's an interesting question, and I don't have a formulated answer for it. So I can give you an opinion of what I think. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of people often struggle with that because, like you say, the relationship between who they are and the businesses that they lead or that they're a part of is quite close. And I really think it depends on what you want it to be.
Yeah.
So if you look at, there are industries where that is the norm. Law firms are often named after people. So and so and co.
Yeah.
Right? And it would be, or a string of, the three sort of main partners. Advertising for a while was also like that. So the idea of an entity, a corporation, being synonymous with a person is not strange. And I think if you had to ask all of those, I don't want to call any legal firms now for legal reasons.
Somebody call Netflix. Got a special on our hands.
For legal reasons. But, I would imagine that there's a sense of comfort in the sense that the organization has my name, but I'm not necessarily always going to be front and center. And so I think for me, again, just, hypothesizing, is that scale is the thing. If you have ambition for scaling, then I think there is possibly a strategy of, over time, what your closeness or proximity to the business is, right? Like I said, so if you start a law firm in its first 3 to 5 years, depending on how big you are going to be very close to the business. But 20 years down the line, when you say so-and-so and so-and-so, no one thinks of the person. So I do think scale is a big consideration set. But when you talk sort of the small businesses, that's where it's a little bit different, because if you don't have ambitions to grow big, then there probably will be a close association to the brand for a long time.
Yeah.
But in other instances, I think it is driven by intention. If you believe that you as a person is always going to be an important factor in the success of your business, then you either A, have to just live with that, or B, you change that over time. And that is obviously in terms of the people that you bring around you, the sort of lessening the visibility that you have in relation to the company and the business. It is all driven by intention. I don't think anyone sits and goes, I'm so annoyed that I can't go to a party because it's going to
ruin my brand.
Well, no one created that association apart from you. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, it doesn't happen by mistake as well. So if you want it to be different, then just create a set or create a strategy that allows, that sort of divergence of yourself and the company to happen. And like I said, I don't think either is bad. It just depends on what you want.
Right.
And then being intentional to be able to make decisions around, I guess, supporting that intention.
Yeah. You answered it far more eloquently than I did, because I remember when I was asked that question, I almost said years ago, it was just like a few weeks ago. And I said, well, it's not that deep. And I meant it. To me, it really isn't that deep, because I think earlier you were talking about the compassion or empathy that we relate to human beings, and we could probably do the same to brands. But obviously, I think it's a bit more difficult when you're giving that brand your money.
Absolutely.
And there's a certain level of accountability to say that we can't allow you to experiment. You don't have that privilege to experiment with your brand when you're taking our money, when you promised us this. But when you're still in the growing phase, I think it's okay. Might be wrong. I might change my mind in 5 years. It's okay. It's all right.
and it'll happen like that. I mean, if you think of, and it's interesting, people getting upset that, oh, I expected so-and-so to behave like this.
Yeah.
Or, something happens and of course, the moment you become a public figure, there is scrutiny on your behavior. But I think sometimes it's an unfair expectation for people not to be people.
Yeah.
You are the CEO, you are the CMO, and it is great, as I said earlier, in terms of integrity, of being consistent in your behavior. But I think what we don't have is an understanding that if someone errs or makes a mistake in their personal capacity, should it always be tied to their professional capacity? And I'm not saying that either is right. I'm just saying I think our immediate thing is, oh, Oprah stepped on a flower. Oh my goodness, she's not, considerate of the environment. And therefore the environmentalists now are on her back and in her DMs. And it feels like that happens too quickly.
Yeah.
It feels like because of visibility, we see these figures so frequently that our understanding of who they are and what they do is often so blurred. And I'm not saying that people should not be corrected and shouldn't be vilified or shouldn't be put under the microscope if they do things that they shouldn't be doing.
Yeah.
But I do think there's a level of understanding that maybe, or a layer of understanding that we should have in terms of why certain things happen and how do we compartmentalize in terms of, I don't like the act, but I understand the person, but I also appreciate the professional, or the public figure, if that happens to be the case.
Yeah. I think also, with the involvement of social media, like you mentioned, your digital, oh my goodness, what's that role again?
Digital creative director.
How does it feel to say it? You fell right into my
because
trap.
why?
You never say it.
Because why am I saying it? What?
And jokes aside, like you said earlier, the digital aspect influences so much of our behaviors. I was watching, it's such a weird reference point, but I was watching The Devil Wears Prada. And there's a part where, I'll call her the devil because I have no idea what her name was in the movie. But I think it was Meryl Streep, right? Yeah. So she was referring to, I think one of the characters was laughing about the way they were so consumed about the belt. Oh, the belt should be thin. It shouldn't be thick. And she was like, there's no difference. It's just a belt. And Meryl Streep had relayed to her that, listen, you judge us for being so consumed by fashion, but you don't understand that the things you're wearing now, the clothes you're wearing were specifically chosen for you. And she went
her blue coat.
Her,
Yes.
oh my!
Which isn't blue. It's yes, yeah.
To this day, that line gives me chills because beyond allowing me or opening me my mind to appreciate people's industries, no matter how unique they are, or just kind of vain.
Yeah.
I appreciate those industries, but also in this sense, I'm thinking, man, social media. I never took social media seriously until I found myself on TikTok, and 2 hours later, I'm watching a movie, and I was like, but I never watch movies like this. You know, there's a type of, I like movies, yes, but like the type of movie I'm watching, but where did I get that from? And then I remembered, oh yeah, it's because of TikTok. Or as a woman, I'll be honest, I'm heavily influenced by the digital beauty industry. I mean, and I'm not talking about the brand itself talking about itself. I'm talking about an average everyday person who'll talk about a brand and say, thank you to the ladies who told me to use vitamin E and this brand. And I'm telling you, I'm quoting it verbatim because that's exactly what I heard.
Yeah.
And so with the involvement of social media now, how do we not? So, okay, my question is, are we making decisions on our own? Or are we being influenced by what we're seeing so much that, especially because we're consuming so much of it? I will admit, I'm admitting it now because I remember Michael Bublé in an interview on Diary of a CEO said that he scrolls on TikTok for hours, and he's a great person, so I could say it. I scroll on TikTok for hours, and it's not even just being entertained. I'm fascinated by the fact that I'm at it. But now I'm like, but what's actually influencing the decisions that I make? I don't wear oversized blazers, but alas,
here we are. So I think it goes without saying that the influence is there. But also to appreciate that, because sometimes it can be very easy to say, oh, we're influenced by social media and we have no sense of autonomy and we're just sheep and following, you know, what we're being fed by the media. Historically, it's always been like that, right? So whether it was people living in a village and there's a king and there's a herald or a, you know, praising or that comes from the palace to report to the people, this is what the king decrees. And people go, okay, cool. That's what we're doing now. We are harvesting after 2 weeks.
Sure.
And then life imitates or responds to that message. And I'm obviously being very crude about it, but the idea that we shouldn't be influenced by the things that we hear and see is wrong from my point of view. We should, because we are communal beings. And the way that we experience the world is through the experiences of others. That's how community happens, right? Is that we are able to learn and to see and to have a sense of, oh, I didn't think of it that way. And whether, you know, that's 1,000 or 2 years ago where there's a farming community that sees another farming community skinning a goat differently. And they go, oh, that's an interesting way to cut the arm or the leg. And they're influenced. And there's knowledge transfer. And there are things that become more ingrained in part of culture because it was seen somewhere else. And that's how even, you know, the whole notion of, you know, migrating, and it's winter, so let's go to somewhere where it's warmer so that we can subject ourselves to different influences geographically, environmentally. That's not a bad thing. What I think the conversation is around and the difference between, I think, all of those, because also then if you think technologically, then, you know, there was print and there was radio and people would sit on the radio and they would listen. And you didn't see things and people heard about this man called Mandela. You heard that on the radio. And the idea of imagining a free South Africa started to be an idea that could be true. And so you could say people's behavior was influenced, right? Based on what they were hearing. There was no visuals, but they were hearing that. And so we've been on that journey. And like I say, fundamentally, I don't think it's a bad thing. The difference of what we see with social media is that in all of those instances that I've mentioned, and maybe obviously barring mass communication and radio, I think the intention was always good. So let me show you this interesting new way to plant your carrots. Look at my crop. It's growing even in, oh, really? For me, the idea of us living communally and allowing the influence of others, of family, of friends, of the people that we experience, for me, at the core, the intention was always good.
Yeah.
And I think what is, I guess, the question mark on social media influence is the intention. And is the idea of what you are seeing isn't naturally always designed or created or curated with your best interest at heart. It may be good, and it may be beautiful, and it may be informative, it may be funny, it may be, but that's, if I ever had to say, is, I guess the caution is just, what is the intention behind what you are consuming? We will consume, we will listen, like I said, we will be influenced. But I think where we maybe trip up is that we lose the ability to be critical about how much we consume and why we are consuming it.
Yeah.
And of course, there's no one who's going to stand on a pedestal and live as though they are uninfluenced, right? And that's why I say it's part of life. But I think we aid ourselves when we go, is this good for me?
Yeah.
It's funny, and I'll make an example. Sometimes there are shows, and again, working in media, there are shows, because you must understand that if you can introduce an idea to people that at first may be taboo, or at first may be controversial, or may be difficult, or to understand or to embrace, all you have to do is just keep kind of sneaking it in.
Kind of like the music industry. I mean, in 2008, you would never hear the F word.
No.
And by F, I mean faith. But you know what I mean? It was not common. And now it's being explicit as possible. And it's just like, wait, what's going on?
So it is. The things that we're seeing, not all of it is just for entertainment purposes only. Yeah. And that's the reality. Yeah. And it always sounds like you're such a wet blanket for saying things like that, because like, oh man, I just want to stay on TikTok and enjoy. And it is. A lot of the videos are very entertaining. But of course, and I will have that hat on, is you can start to see, and I remember when I was lecturing, and again, because this is what I look out for, I would be able to tell which influencer was popular just by looking at my class.
Oh my goodness.
And again, it sounds like such a dramatic thing. So, it's not that black and white, but sometimes it is. And I remember at that time, I don't know what it is now, I used to say, it sometimes feels like I'm teaching, oh no, let me not say the person there, but it would sometimes feel as though I am teaching miniature versions of a certain celebrity.
Yeah.
Because of the way that those kids would carry themselves, and the way that they have so adopted the mindset, the language, the mannerisms of this public figure, that they aren't aware of how much they're displaying and expressing that when they're talking. And so that's for me the dangerous part is people, I love music, I love that. But without having the ability, I think, like I say, to be critical about what is this influence. To be able to say, yeah, you got me, you influenced me, I think is okay because at least you're aware.
Right.
The danger is when you're not aware.
Yeah.
And your life starts to lean into a certain direction. And again, look, sometimes it's good and sometimes it's fitness. And you really start to lean into fitness and next thing you're a fitness bunny. But even in that, you may find yourself then doing it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
And then it's, about what it looks like when you go to the gym and making sure that everybody sees you working out. And even though their original intention was good, but because at the core, the influence wasn't pure, you then find yourself in a bit of a money situation.
Yeah.
So that's my maybe slightly controversial, but not. But I think just honest for you is that being influenced is okay. We've always lived like that. But not all influence has a good intention.
Yeah.
And I think the more we are aware of that is the easier we can take on things. Okay, I'll take that. No, I won't take that. Oh, that's great. Okay, she mentions vitamin E. Great. But then when she starts talking about that other stuff, that's not for me.
Yeah.
So our ability to be able to filter out what is good for us and what is not, because obviously not all of it is bad.
I think also in addition to intention, it's delivery, which then kind of works in the inverse when your intention is good, but then your delivery is 5 reasons why you need to stop dating that man. And you're like, what just happened? 5 reasons you should use this product or 5. And it's, yes, those are what you call it, catchphrases that kind of get you on the onset. But I worry about that. I worry about that because I think that the people that are delivering and in that those influences, because they are a brand in their own right, the detriment then comes in when you don't realize as a brand that you are trying to influence intelligent people. And then it seems as though, and going back to the whole cancel culture concept, that it seems as though everyone now is just charging against you or your brand, when in fact you positioned yourself as a leader of thought in that particular industry, or and your brand is all about community, and then the one time the community needs you, because now the community expects you to be there for you. For you to be there for all the time, because that's what you promised. And as an individual also influencing, then you're surprised that people want to get into your personal life because you've placed your personal life out there. And then you're shocked, and then it becomes a whole hoo-ha. And in my mind, I'm like, but that's what you put out there.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's just interesting thoughts. But another thing I like to mention, right? I had a hard time, and I still kind of do, referring to myself as an entrepreneur, right? Self-employed, didn't have a problem with it. Textbook, it's okay, business owner, we're getting there, sure. Yeah. But entrepreneur, that I think kind of, because of social media again, all I was seeing when you just put in the search tab entrepreneur, you're gonna see videos of, you're not an entrepreneur if you don't have 5 employees. Not everyone is meant to be an entrepreneur, and it's like, not in this gig economy. Let people do what they gotta do, or like when I was talking to a friend of mine, and she said, well, on my LinkedIn description, should I put entrepreneur? I said, girl, you're a farmer. What do you mean? Nobody's relaxed. So it seems so nuanced and just so elaborate, and I'm just like, I don't even know if I am. And so that's why I refer to myself as a podcaster or a social media manager, because I can justify that, and I can justify how income is made, how I receive my income. But then, because of social media, I'm even confused. I don't even know what an entrepreneur is. Like, you're not a business owner if you have 1 employee. You are self-employed. I'm like, sorry, I apologize. I don't need to have 1 employee. It just doesn't make sense to have 10.
Yeah.
I
think it's so there will be the crowd that loves to gatekeep.
The camera guys.
And you were laughing. And that's a reality, right? Is that people have this sense of, like you say, I'm the chosen one in this particular field, and therefore I create the rules. On one hand, look, I think there will always be the purists and, you know, the sort of the unorthodox and the unconventional. And in any industry, it's going to be like that, right? So I sometimes wonder, you know, the sort of big global historical beauty brands, when they watch influencer content, like, what do they think? Right? Because a lot of it, again, from a textbook point of view, is unconventional. And that's maybe what makes it so relevant to the audiences, right? Is, thank you, you've taken the product out the box, but you've presented it to me in a really organic and real way. And people go, I can relate to that person, right? And so I always think, you know, the executives, and they must go, like, what is happening?
When did this happen?
That's not how you use our product.
Right.
So you have the purists and you have the, you know, the people that sort of go against the grain. But I also do think, my thoughts on this is that you have to earn the right to be able to have a voice, and to be able to say that these are the parameters in terms of how this thing should be done. Because there's a difference between expertise and popularity. And often, like, it becomes very interchangeable, where we assume that because someone's popular that they're an expert. And that's, as the famous video said, is where the danger is. It is this idea that because I'm popular, I'm an expert. And the two are very different.
Kind of like the Kanye West video where he was referring to Lady Gaga. And you've never heard this? It's like, Lady Gaga, I love Lady Gaga's music, but what does she know about cameras? When they made her, I think, a Polaroid or a Canon, I don't know which brand it was, ambassador. And they're like, he was like, it doesn't make sense. She doesn't know anything about cameras. But is it about that though?
So that's more, I think, brand fit.
Okay.
I think there's a big conversation to be had about the way that we...
Try not to get yourself in trouble.
I absolutely am doing just that. But the way that we gravitate towards popularity and how then that becomes just like a cycle. So someone becomes popular because they're doing something interesting. They get a huge following. Now there's the pressure to continue to do that interesting thing.
Yeah.
And maybe they can't. And so then they start something else because there needs to be an outlet, or there needs to be multiple streams of income to be able to take advantage of this popularity.
Yeah.
And whereas I think if you're just good at what you do, you're going to be good.
Yeah.
Generally.
Yeah.
And especially if you're doing it for the right reasons. If you're good at what you do, if at the core of your rise is expertise, you're going to be good, and you don't need to worry, I think, about, am I going to be relevant today? Am I going to be popular today? And so I think the whole popularity sort of drive is what trips people up, because then you've got someone who's been doing something interesting and now they've got a huge following, and they don't maybe have the ability to understand that, how do I now serve these people who came here because I created a few funny videos, or I created a few interesting makeup videos, or I did a few skits, or whatever the case is. How do I now serve this audience that's sitting there waiting for me to be interesting every day? and then it becomes a lot, because it's not out of, this is a gift that I have. And again, this is my view, is that a lot of the people that I think we place on these pedestals. It's because it's easy to like them. And it's, yeah, like and again, back to the whole community thing. And we go, but is this person actually good at what they do?
Ooh.
And
Yeah.
but it's easy to like him.
Yeah.
It's easy to like her. And for brands, it's great to partner with them because look at their following. And there's an aura, there's a, that the sort of attention that they hold and they demand. But are they good at what they do? And that, I mean, I think obviously also working in advertising in terms of working with public figures and people with brands, it's always important to me is that, is this person actually good at what they do? 1 or 2 or 1A and 1B, what do they do? Right?
Right.
And that's an important question. So if you are doing makeup tutorials, so are you a makeup artist that happens to be publicizing your work online, or are you an online marketing person that happens to be doing makeup content?
Yeah.
And those are two very different things, and it's two different industries. One is makeup and beauty that happens to be delivered on an online platform, right? And I think viewing it that way changes, I think, your angle and your skew and what you lean into and the things that you invest in. The other is you're into creating online content, and the subset or the topic and the theme that you lean into is makeup, or sometimes it's lifestyle, sometimes. So those two things are different. The skill sets here, you would probably lean into understanding, of course, the actual craft of makeup and beauty and shades and angel wings and all the things that come with that craft. Whereas on this side, it's, okay, what frame rate do I shoot this video at? What type of lighting am I using? When I upload, am I uploading using a cross-platform, sort of software? Am I recording my sound separately? Do I monetize my videos? Do I use meta tags in my... So the lenses are different. And a lot of times they overlap because someone has a passion, maybe. Or someone's been influenced because they saw another influencer girly and goes, I want to do that.
Yeah.
But understanding how you approach it and what hat you're wearing and what you're into is important, because that's what's going to govern what am I investing into. So am I buying the best makeup, or am I buying the best video equipment? Right? And often that becomes a question, right? And the tension is, what is my product? Is it the way that the makeup looks on my skin, or is it the way that I'm able to monetize and be strategic about how my content lands online? And so I think just making that example, it is something that I feel we need to be more critical of. And I think then we're going to be less, let's run after this person. And
not easily swayed.
Yes, because okay, but what are they good at?
Yeah. And
what do they do?
Senzo, can I say that you must be a buzzkill? Because and I remember you have this gift or skill, this rare set of skills, and one of them being able to identify a mistake, grammatical error in a menu. What, like how? And so I'm just wondering, as you grew, as you just in your personal capacity, as you grew older and your curiosity of things, rather, and you being so curious, did it kind of make you so overly critical of the world and the world that we live in? Or did it make you more appreciative of the imbalances of it all? Or did you kind of feel like people are lazy and need to spell things right on a menu?
No, so I think probably the first thing to say is that having a desire to see things live or exist a certain way can often feel like criticism, but for me, it feels as though I love holding or creating space for seeing things in their ideal state, as opposed to that could be better or that's wrong. For me, is I look at the influencer economy and trend, and I go, it's such a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And the way that it's challenged how brands exist is brilliant. The way that it's pushed, the media houses to think about the cost of content and user engagement is brilliant, because it's decentralized, it's what's the word? Democratized.
Yeah.
Wow.
Democratizes.
There you go. The democratization of media.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
And because I love it, I go, it'd be so beautiful if that was done right.
Yeah.
Right? As opposed to, like that, So that's my view. And whether that's the influencer economy, whether that's basketball, we were talking about earlier. So in terms of some, very passionate about basketball, and I often think about basketball on the continent, basketball in the country, and how I would love for it. There's a new podcast out with LeBron James and JJ Redick, and it's just basketball 101. They talk the strategy, the theory, the details. No narratives, no agendas, who did that? It's just what happens on a basketball court. And it's been interesting sort of how it's received online, because a lot of the orthodox, the purist basketball fans are going, this is beautiful.
And you're one of them?
Yes, of course. I will watch a 40-minute episode, and they're just talking about different moves or what one player on the court should be doing over another. But I often think there are probably fans who like, this is boring.
Yeah.
And so, and going back to basketball on the continent and in the country, and me going, I would love for this to be local, like that there would be basketball nerds, because it's difficult, I think, to build something if it isn't built off of a premise of expertise. Then you can have excitement and experience and engagement and things out there. But fundamentally, people need to understand the game. But I think sometimes, I don't know, locally it's like, vibes, and let's call that artist, and but people actually understand what's happening.
Yeah.
But so I think for me in growing, it's always been that, is seeing things and sort of imagining them in their ideal state, or in a state which I believe would be good or add value, to the people that interact with that thing, whether it's an industry or a sport or a song or a menu. So and I mean, I was thinking about that the other day, but the only reason I think why that's ever been an idea in my head, and maybe just to explain it. So the theory that there is a typo in every menu.
Yeah.
And it's simply because I believe that there are things that as human beings, that when we do them, after a while, we like, let me relax a bit. No one's gonna, and designing menus, designing annual reports, it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And it's so detailed. And so for me, it's more about proving the human condition. That when you have to do something so detailed over a long period of time, you're human.
Yeah.
There is going to be a missing comma, right? But more than that is that and I haven't yet found a menu that doesn't have a typo, but when I do, or at least the ones where I find it on like the 6th page and I'm like,
you did well.
I'm really impressed, because I think this guy or girl sat and was so detailed.
Yeah.
And man, look at the numbering, look at the prices, everything. Okay, on the 6th page, but you did well, right? Yeah. And for me, I appreciate that level of detail.
Yeah.
So it's never been, I think, about wanting to be a sort of Mr. Critical.
Yeah.
I think my job also sort of forces me to look into detail and to analyze things and to understand what they are
Yeah.
and potentially what they should be or could be. And so I think then in my personality, then I've just naturally sort of become that way as well.
Yeah. And so what would you say? What would you say is your brand philosophy?
Me, personally.
As Senzo, what then would you say is your brand philosophy and how you got there? Okay, guide us how you got there. All right. If you're thinking about it now.
Yeah.
Take us through who you are as an individual, the impact you'd like to leave, and how all of that influences your brand philosophy.
So maybe I'll express it in two mantras, I guess, that I subscribe to. The first being, I live to know him and to make him known.
Yeah. Him
being God.
Yeah.
And for me, yeah, so that's sort of, first up in the sense that the desire, the motive, the foundation of what I do is in my personal capacity to know God. And in my experience and journey and navigating the knowledge that I gain and experience and live with and test about what I know about God, is that becomes teachable to the people in the world around me. So to know him and to make him known. That if I say I want to have an understanding of how God can guide the way that I think about advertising or think about branding, or think about creativity or design, that knowledge isn't only going to nourish and enrich me. That's always been my thing, is what I know, and the first thing that I want to know is God. For me, it would almost in a way be in vain if it was just for me. It doesn't mean that everything that I know, my immediate sort of goal is to tell people about it. For me, it's that if I know it, then I live it, then you see it. I don't need to tell you. So that's first up, to know him and to make him known. And I think how that shapes my branding philosophy is that there is intention at the center and the core of everything that I do. Down to, my career. And I was saying to someone yesterday, and someone I've said often, is that I've been so privileged and blessed to be able to go about my career at my pace. And to do it with intention, and that at every stage, job, role, that it was never a surprise. It was never what are we going to do now? Or where are we going to do now? There was a sense of purpose and intention with, okay, I work here. Okay, we work here, or I live here. Now I live here. And that's my branding philosophy, is that do it with intention.
Yeah.
And whether it's how you interact with people, whether it's how you shape your online presence, whether it's how you show up at work, whether it's the way that you describe what you do, the way that you derive joy in what you do it with intention. Because for me, I've always been about, I'm the person who's responsible for my experience in my craft. I can't leave it up to someone else. So it can't be, oh, the work environment, or, oh, the industry is saying this. For me, I have a mandate, and I know what I want to achieve in the industry, and it's very clear to me. And so I try as much as possible to make sure that my overall experience is governed by that, in terms of what God has told me about what I'm meant to be doing. Yes, of course, you meet people, and that's the beauty of it as well, that you'll learn from, and that you'll grow with and grow alongside, and also grow out of. But all of that, for me, talks to that I'm doing this thing with intention. And at no point do I feel as though I'm being pulled, or I'm being pressured, or I'm precious about things that I shouldn't be precious about. So from living to know him and to make him known, for me, then I think my philosophy is being intentional. And I guess, navigating the world and the industry in that way, at my pace, with the values that I hold, but also to the incredibly high standards that I set for myself.
Yes.
And that's simply because I know what it is and who it is that I'm meant to be. And it's a daily pursuit of that. And not feeling, accomplished, or not, seeing the milestones, and they're beautiful, and God is really, amazing with that. But knowing sort of what's the end goal. Yeah.
I'm really struggling wrapping this up. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm really, really struggling, and I'm pretty sure we've gone over an hour. But I do want to say that intention requires, and just listening to you now, intention requires so much accountability, awareness of self, and positive awareness of self, and acknowledging where you fall short, which is really hard. And yet also acknowledging how great you are, which also is a battle of the ego. So that is a very, it's tough. Good luck with that. But I appreciate it, because like you said, I mean, if you do decide to fully pursue the whole PhD in brand leadership, I wouldn't think of anyone better, no pressure. And I appreciate you taking time to do this podcast. And I wish people understood that this is just like 2% of conversations we really do have. And I say this often, maybe, I'm not sure, but I do say this, whether to you or to myself, referring to you, then I think it's a privilege to be a friend to you. Because in a way you hold me accountable to the standards that I've set for myself, that I oftentimes struggle with acknowledging, that this is who I truly am and who I know myself to be, because we share the same faith. I think also it's just like, really, God, do we really got to be that great, But I think that in your humanity, there is just a strange level of divinity that cannot be pinpoint just easily. And I think being your friend, and I think your colleagues as well, have seen how your colleagues interact with you, call them your babies. I don't know, that's a bit weird to me. But I've seen how they see you as this leader. And I think we're going to title this brand leadership, actually, because in a way you are, you are a leader of yourself, and you're so aware of yourself, and your humanity, and which makes you great. And I'm very proud of you. I'm about to get emotional. We're going to wrap it up. Thank you so much for watching this episode and listening. And make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.